are all set for Facebook. Okay, perfect. We are live on social media. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe. I'm the CEO of Palm Beach Tech, and we are really excited to have another Tech Talk live here on Monday evening. We're here with the team from CloudHesive, one of the best and brightest tech companies that are really emerging here in South Florida, has grown even through COVID. A shout out to the team who's actually, plenty of them are on the call here with us today on Zoom for this conversation. We're going to be talking with Jamie Marshall, their VP of Cloud Sales, and also Stephen DeMarzio from Trend Micro, who's going to be on and chatting with Jamie. But for those who haven't seen our talk before, every talk about 15-20 minutes on some great technology companies and what they're up to here in South Florida. So again, very happy to have you guys here. Jamie, I'll give it to you and to take it away, sir. Thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks for having me today. My name is Jamie Marshall. As Joe said, I'm VP of Cloud Service Sales for CloudHesive. For those of you that don't know us, we're a Fort Lauderdale-based cloud service provider with offices in Virginia, Buenos Aires, and Santiago, Chile. We pretty much specialize in helping customers migrate and manage in public cloud with an emphasis on AWS. We're a premier partner with AWS, so that puts us, at the top 50 some companies that do integrations with AWS. A little bit about myself: I've been in the IT field for about 25 years. Have held various roles in corporate IT as well as consulting. I was CTO for CBRE up until about a year and a half ago, and I spent the previous 20 years in consulting with a focus on cloud. So nice to make introductions. So let's get started. So let's take a look at some trends in the marketplace. We use this study as a great representation of what organizations are facing as they move to cloud. This was a study by Flexera, and when I think about is cool about it, it's pretty recent. So I think they did it in June of this year. And they focused it on around 750 companies that were migrating to the cloud, with a focus obviously not only around cost optimization, but trends and challenges for those companies. And if you look at it, some of those challenges include migrations, including containers and security, which Steve will discuss later on, and some of the challenges that organizations are facing. But in the study, what they really found is organizations are over budget on cloud spend by an average of 23% against their budget. So it's a huge problem, and they see that increasing 47% year to year. So if you look at sort of some of the things from the respondents, the other thing that was a key point is they see a lot of waste in their environment. So they've deployed stuff, they're not using it. So they estimate that there's probably 30% of waste within the environment. And although organizations are taking advantage of, discounting options and ways to leverage automated policies to start and stop services when they're not needed or right-sizing instances, it's really falling short from a budget perspective. So what we'll talk about today is really around how do you cost optimize and what are the best practices of that. And a couple of the things I like to use here are, some of these Gartner quotes, but this one in particular: without cost optimization, Gartner estimates that overspending is about 70%. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, I think of this from, for those of you that have been in telecom, you heard the term telecom expense management for many years. But what we're talking about when we talk about cloud spend optimization, it's really around cloud expense management, or SEM. And how do you do that better to save the company money? So I'm going to focus here now on some best practices from the standpoint of reducing that cloud spend. And the easiest way to optimize cloud costs is really to look for unused or unattached resources. This is kind of the low-hanging fruit. An example is, an administrator or developer might spin up some resources, use on a temporary basis, and forget about it when the job's done. Or maybe an IT admin forgot to remove storage that was attached to instances that were terminated. This happens all across the globe, very frequent. And the result is that, companies are faced with AWS bills and charges of stuff that was purchased but no longer using. So a best practice to get started is to really look at, some of those unused resources and start deprecating those resources that are no longer used. The next step that we see in optimizing the computing costs is to address idle resources. And idle resources are really resources that are between 1% and 5% utilized. So when an enterprise is billed 100% for a resource that's used 1% to 5%, it's a good time to think about, how do I move that resource to an instance that's already being used? So it's a quick and easy way that you can address some of that spend. The next thing we like to use is we partner with a number of companies, and one in particular is a company called Cloud Checker. But one of the things that they do is they provide heat maps on your cloud usage. So you can easily take a look at your workloads and visualize, the peaks and valleys within your environment. So you could take a look at this diagram or this chart on the right here, which kind of gives you an idea of sort of peaks and valleys for a particular workload at any given time. And from that, what you can do is decide ways to optimize that, whether that's on a scheduled basis, so you could turn up and turn down that resource, or potentially move that resource to a lower sized solution. Another area that you need to look at is really right sizing. And that's really, modifying the instance type and size of the environment so that you're not using resources that are not needed. Another area is in the areas of AWS and Azure. It's super important to understand options around licensing models across the portfolio of services that they provide. And we'll discuss that in detail over the next few slides, but it's really, how do I take advantage of reserved instances in AWS? How do I look at savings plans? What's the difference between the two? And then in an Azure environment, how do I look at reserved VM instances, which is pretty consistent with what reserved instances are in AWS. One of the last couple areas is really looking at spot instances, which is another option within AWS. And then finally, how do you determine your cloud placement for multi-cloud environments? So when do I use AWS to optimize spend? When do I use Azure or GCP to optimize that spend? So from a best practice standpoint, these are the key areas that we like to look at from a cost optimization perspective. And when we look at cost optimization, there are a number of different areas that are kind of key building blocks to consider. And the most simplistic way for you to drive the savings is through long-term commitments, with those providers. But most importantly, the key areas to prepare for that optimization are really, how do you partition your environment? What are you doing to tag resources, understand where they live, and how potentially are they charged back to organizations? In a lot of cases, when we go to our managed service customers that have already deployed services, they're not able to charge back and really report on those instances being used. So it's critical to tag and partition your environment to really map to your business needs. Another key area is really around housekeeping. So how do I, continuously review, identify those underutilized resources? If you go back to the TEM example, this might be the same thing as you would have, on an environment where maybe you size something for, a 1 gig circuit, but you're only using, 50 meg at most times. So how do I take that spend and adjust it and do things that are most cost optimized? I focused a little bit on resources and right sizing those resources, but that's obviously an important thing. And then probably the most important area, and we have Chad on our line, but monthly audits are critical to cost optimization within any public cloud environment. It really requires a dedicated resource to continuously look at the spend and optimize it on a month-to-month basis. In some cases, that's looking at your budget and reporting on that budget in an automated fashion from a week-to-week perspective or hour-to-hour perspective. So right now, I'm going to go into sort of some of the low-hanging fruit to drive costs. The easiest way for companies to reduce their cloud spend is really through long-term discounts. the majority of customers that we work with are using on-demand resources, and quite frankly, they could spend 50+% just through a 1 or 3 year commitment. In many cases, if those are RIs or savings plans, there's no upfront charges associated with that, but it's just a matter of understanding your spend and being able to size and configure environment so that you use those resources from a consumption model. But in the most simplistic terms, our companies can average 50% discount just through looking at long-term commitments, whether that be 1 or 3 year AWS or Azure price models. But the most optimized way is to really kind of do it in a twofold approach. The first approach is really around an optimization study. So taking tools like Cloud Checker and some of the things that Steve will talk about, and really understanding those workloads and right-sizing them, deprecating resources that are no longer using, and saving a quick 25% just by, optimizing those resources. And then if you take that one step further, you could reduce another 50%. So by combining these, companies can save, close to 70% of their cloud spend using these tools, processes, and technologies. So right now, I'm going to focus a little bit on AWS purchasing options. I know most of the CloudHesive folks are pretty familiar with this, but the 4 most common plans that you have from a purchase perspective are really on-demand resources, which is really a pay by the second, for resources that are used. The next is really reserved instances, and this is basically an instance that's reserved for you of a EC2 type, for example, and a commitment to use that consistent configuration in a given region for a term of 1 to 3 years. But one of the things to keep in mind with this is you need to have some level of certainty on the computing power you need for that reserved instance. The other option is something new from AWS, and that's what's considered a savings plan. It's very similar to what you would get within a reserved instance, but if you look at the table on the right, there are a number of different fixed, flexible, and capacity reservation components that make that up. So an example of that will be flexibility. So if I have an EC2 instance plan, I can change the OS size and tenancy. If I have a standard RI, I need to purchase additional RIs for making those adjustments. So what's important to do whether you pick either a reserved instance or savings plan is to really understand your resource consumption and what you need. But it's a great way to save money. And on average, reserved instances and savings plans, based on the duration, upfront costs, upfront payments, you could save anywhere between, say, 25 and 50%. And then the other purchase option is around spot instances. And this is really another area where you can reduce your AWS spend by purchasing sort of these on-demand spot, think of it as a marketplace EC2 instance at a reduced cost, which is excess capacity that's available within AWS. So from an AWS perspective, those are the 4 most common areas that we see people using for cost optimization. When it comes to Azure, they don't have as many options, but one of the things that's important is they do provide reserve instances. For Azure, the reserved instances can save about 72% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing. Again, it's a 1 and 3 year commitment. You can do an all upfront or monthly payment structure, and it does provide some flexibility around VM sizes, within the same group or region. Another example is you can exchange or cancel an RI at any time. And one of the most important things for our Microsoft customers is to really look at their enterprise agreements. There are a lot of efficiencies and discounts that can be offered from Microsoft respective to purchasing options when it comes to cloud spend. So if we kind of sum things up, we can kind of really categorize cost optimization from a success planning perspective into 5 areas. First being infrastructure optimization. This is where we talked about understanding those baselines, understanding your sizing, understanding the contracts that are available, as well as the management options available within those plans. The next area is really, how do I get started? And for most companies, it's good to start small and expand. So focus on, a small component of your environment. Start looking at the spend within that environment, and start, optimizing that as sort of a first step. The next area, which we think is really critical, is your tool selection. AWS and Azure provide some great utilities that provide cost analysis, whether that's, Cost Explorer in AWS or Azure Billing Portal. But a lot of the third parties provide a much more robust tool package to really optimize what that spend is. And a good example, again, is how we use Cloud Checker. And, for many of our customers, our service offering is strictly around cloud spend. So we provide a monthly service where they get a tool and a resource that understands the various options and things available, and then provides a monthly report on those services. And lastly, I talked about this earlier, but it's important to have sort of a dedicated financial analyst that's looking at these, so that you're not caught off guard by a bill that's been inflated 100% month to month. So it's really important to actually dedicate some resources to that, whether that's an FA that's in IT or a third-party cost management company like we would provide. So hopefully, that gives you an idea on some of the options available to you from a cost management perspective and optimizing your spend, whether that be within AWS or an Azure environment. Now I'm going to hand it over to Steve now to talk about some of the sort of best practices and things that are available from Trend Micro respective to cloud security and management. Steve, do you want to take over, or do you want me to drive?
Yeah, no, that works. I don't know if I can advance the slides though. So if you unshare and I share, then I should be able to take it from there. Perfect. Okay, thank you, everybody. Great information there by Jamie, and really talking about the opportunities all around when you're going into cloud migrations. So what we thought would be a great idea is to really talk about how you can open doors, or even that visibility into what even Gartner has coined cloud security posture management. Yes, we know there's things around security and shared responsibility model, but even before that, how do we start looking at these environments? So just a quick update on Trend. So Trend Micro, we are a focused provider for cybersecurity solutions for over 30 years. So we've been in this market for quite some time and leading, whether it is around virtualization, users, and then today we're going to specifically dig a little deeper into how we optimize security for AWS, for Azure, for other cloud provider workloads. And this is fueled. We have many customers across the globe, and that really feeds into our smart protection network. So we're not just looking at one facet or one particular area. So there's a lot that goes into our practice, into our mindset that you can use, obviously, to help in your posture. And whether you look at internally, whether you get referrals, or even look into some of the third-party testing, one we like to highlight is Gartner. And Gartner, they've always had a score around end user and email, but they even just released their market guide right around what, again, what Jamie was positioning for that cloud workload protection. And, I think it's important to call out that Gartner, they had 7 different recommendations, vulnerability shielding, system scanning, of course, malware, and there's a full list you can go look. But in their assessment, Trend Micro was identified to help organizations like yours meet all of these through our solutions. So let's dial it back into what Jamie was digging into. So one of the areas or the trends that we're seeing with cloud migrations throughout the globe is with an exploding set of cloud services and an increasingly complex landscape. It's of no surprise that there's new vectors for breaches or opportunities. These are the four in particular that Trend Micro predicted would be especially relevant in 2020. And our predictions were even before our current status of COVID, which even accelerated it. So with the growing adoption of DevOps processes, attackers will leverage weak links into these DevOps pipelines. With the growing popularity of serverless platforms like AWS Lambda or even Azure Functions or Google Cloud, this introduces an attack route for vulnerable code. And then, of course, container security, both at the image and the registry level, will always be top of minds. But what we're going to really dig a little deeper into is all around misconfigurations, because these do continue to be a serious security concern. And when we look at with all of the different types of configurations, these are the 5 specific that you see on the right. That we predicted to be especially harmful when migrating into the cloud. And when cloud transformations and migrations are happening, this will continue to open up new challenges, as well as efforts to go and fix and remediate not only the security, but the posture in these cloud environments. So why do these misconfigurations happen? So here are some of the main challenges that we see, by our, whether it's solution providers like CloudHesive or even within their end customers and prospective customers. And the risk of misconfigurations may seem obvious in theory, but in practice, it could be overloaded IT teams who are often simply trying to streamline workflows or make internal processes easier. So settings, they could be changed to give read and or write access to anyone in an organization with the necessary credentials. So what's not realized, though, is that this level of exposure can be easily found and exploited by these criminals. So at the rate we're seeing new features and functionalities from our cloud providers are growing, of course it's exciting and offering promising new ventures. But at that same time, it does add these complexities to the cloud environments. Jamie did go over some of them. Are you ensuring your cost is in line? Are you ensuring that your posture is set up? And this is where you have an opportunity to monitor these cloud infrastructures for these misconfigured environments or exposed system. So Trend, we have a solution which is called Cloud One Conformity. And where we're working with our customers and our providers, we're giving you a faster approach. We're accelerating your time through Cloud One Conformity to identify real-time misconfiguration in the cloud. We're giving you consolidated views into these multi-cloud environments, not just in AWS or not just in Azure. Aside from these frameworks or these pillars of well architecture, we're also helping you align to standard framework or compliance reports like NIST, HIPAA, PCI DSS. We have third-party integrations. We know that it may be challenging to use another tool. So if you're using things like Slack, PagerDuty, SNS, etc., we're able to easily tie into your workflow. And I'll keep going back to what Jamie was mentioning. We accelerate the time to show you any cost optimization recommendations, as well as auto remediation for these actions and these high risk detections. Before we really look at the solution, for our customers and partners who are moving into environments like AWS or Azure, you're probably seeing that our cloud providers are also providing us tools or visibility. Probably most popular, or at least bringing a mainstream name to it, was with AWS and what they call the well-architected framework. And as Jamie mentioned a lot about cost optimization, that's a pillar that AWS and Azure state, to ensure that you're aligning or you have a preferred framework. Here's the pillars of well-architect that as you move into cloud workloads, you should align to have that best framework. And Trend Micro's conformity solution maps back to these frameworks. So again, you're able to perform reviews as well as build opportunities or work with service providers like CloudHesive to establish a statement of work and how you can go and remediate these findings. So from here, I'd like to just do a very quick deep dive into the solution here. All right. So here is the cloud conformity SaaS-based solution. So whether you or, again, working with a cloud solution provider, you're able to quickly tie in no agent to deploy into your environment. You simply click add account and you'll see that the solution is live right now with AWS as well as Azure, and GCP will be coming as well. But once you plug in, and I'm plugged into an AWS account, within minutes, this is going to go and validate against hundreds of checks. So you can automatically get a framework. Because I have AWS as my demo account, it's going to go and give me a view into that AWS well architecture framework. If this were Azure, it would align back there. If I had a hybrid approach, it would break it down. As I scroll down, and again, I'll keep tying back to the very important points that Jamie was highlighting. Azure has 5 pillars as well as AWS, and this will break it down as to how your workload is mapping back to that framework. Double clicking into cost optimization. If you wanted to go and improve, you'll see that my workload right here is only 33% compliant. When I click improve, it's going to go and give me these specific rules or these specific resources that provided that error or that provided that event to trigger. To get a bigger view into it, I'm going to click Browse All Checks because maybe you're coming up to a bigger review or maybe you want to look at different frameworks. So again, because I didn't just click into cost optimization, this reviews all 5 pillars of the AWS well-architected framework. And if you've ever done a review, you may be familiar with the 52 questions that you may have to answer or sit down with a service provider to answer. This helps bring that data to those questions or even the unknowns that you may have. So when I open this up, again, it will give me the specific rule as well as any of the workloads that tied back into that error. And most importantly, when I click this resolve button, it's going to tie you right into the Trend Micro Cloud One conformity knowledge base. It's going to give you there's about 700 rules that this maps back into. It's going to pull back the details of the AWS findings. And when you scroll down, it's going to tell you how to go and remediate that, whether it's through the AWS console or the CLI, or if you're working with a solution provider, it's going to allow you to build a statement of work so you can see exactly how to go fix and remediate that. And if you didn't want to look at the AWS well-architected framework, or maybe you're having a NIST review, simply by clicking NIST, it will reshuffle or redo those findings, and align back into a NIST framework. So again, there's a lot of information in detail here, but using a solution like Cloud Conformity that would help bring more visibility into that environment. So Jamie, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share here. We may have some questions coming through, but hopefully that map back into some of the information that you were providing as well.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for doing the deep dive there for us on a Monday, going all in. Also, I want to give credit to Steven. He actually has a real backdrop and not like a fake one like the rest of us do. So kudos on going the extra mile there. So if you do have a question and you're in Zoom, you can either raise your hand or you can take yourself off of mute right now and join in the conversation for Jamie and for Steven. All right.
So just in summary, I want to bring up one thing. If anybody, has seen the tool that, Steve demoed, we will do some risk-free assessments for that platform to customers. If you're interested, just contact sales@cloudhesive.com and we can kind of get that coordinated. And we do have some Amazon gift cards available for those of you that go through the review and review the findings.
And we are just about at time, just because we are at 6:30. But for those that do have questions, can you put your information back up there, Jamie? I don't know if you got contact information slide there.
Sure.
Perfect.
Do you see it?
Yeah, I see the sales. I didn't know if you had like a personal one as well, but is that the best way to get a hold of
Yeah,
it?
either that or, Jamie, JAMIE Marshall, MARSHALL @cloudhesive.com.
Gotcha. All right, last chance if anyone wants to chime in with a question.
I see that someone asked if we had available labs online. So if that meant to use the solution, the answer is yes. When you reach out to Jamie, they'll give you, availability to go plug this into your account, or, as I mentioned a few times, working with a CloudHesive to do that assessment, review a lot of the findings. It can be intimidating when it pulls back, 50, 60 different findings, but either way would be available.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, we are at time. We did get right up to it. A lot of really good content information. Anytime you add AWS in on a Monday, it hits a bingo slot for me. So thank you guys so much for sharing. And thank you, of course, to CloudHesive for being a long-standing and solid member here for our organization. So this video and the whole talk will be on Facebook. You can go and look at it right after you get on offline, and you can share it out to your friends and colleagues. Just go to facebook.com/PalmBeachTech and you can see it there. And we are on LinkedIn as well. So thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great rest of your week.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.